If you're ready to get it going, everybody in the building say welcome to the faith. Yeah.
Hi, it's Pete. Welcome back to Question Christ. Today I want to talk about the double standard that's used when people critique Christianity in the Bible versus other historical events or other historical writings. Now, I showed in my last video, Jesus, a Man of History, that there was a reference to Jesus by the Roman historian Tacitus. And I got a lot of comments that it was most likely that it was added on by Christian writers afterwards. That is usually the charge. The church added it on, is what I usually hear. Now, there are clear, undisputable proof that this did indeed happen in the past, that church people did add on to writings. But it can't be argued in every single case, and the Tacitus quote is a perfect example. Most scholars would agree that the Tacitus quote, and I'll put it up while we're talking, is in exact alignment with the style Tacitus wrote in. And the fact that Christians are basically blamed for the fires that burned down Rome in 64 AD it's a little suspect why a Christian writer would want to add that on. Christians are called names and also blamed for a major tragedy in Rome. So why would a Christian writer want to say, hey, Christians did that? It doesn't make any sense. What church writer would want to paint the early Christians in such a light? It doesn't make any sense. Now, you take that in contrast with the Josephus or Josephus quotes, which I left out of my video before, because there is a lot of evidence to say that indeed those quotes were tampered with. And again, it portrays Christianity in a more positive light. That is a decent argument. But to say someone wanted to add on the Christians burned down Rome, and we want everyone to believe that doesn't make any sense to me. Now, Tacitus is used by college professors all over the country, and it's never disputed that Tacitus is a reliable historian. He is seen as one of the most prominent Roman historians of the time. So unless you're ready to call Tacitus unreliable in all his other writings, then it is intellectually dishonest, in my opinion, to call him unreliable in this one specific area. The double standard continues when you start talking about the Bible. Now, the big argument that the Bible is unreliable is because there's no originals left, and that there's a huge time gap between the copies we have and the actual events. Now, it is true, the earliest copies of the New Testament that we have are over 225 years older than the events that they talk about. So there's a 225-year gap there. There are other fragments that are found that date just about 50 years away from the actual events that they talk about. But those are just fragments. So just for argument's sake, let's just talk about the complete copies of the New Testament that we have. They date about 225 years away from the events they talk about. Now, in contrast, take a true historical figure, undisputed, like Julius Caesar. Okay, Julius Caesar wrote a masterpiece called The Gallic Wars, and it describes in detail all his military campaigns in a certain time frame. And nobody would argue that this document was fraudulent. It is, again, used all the time in classrooms across the country. It's been analyzed for its military brilliance. But the funny thing is that the earliest copies of this work that is taken at face value was written over 1,000 years after the facts. Again, no originals. And there's a 1,000-year gap between the original and the copies we actually have now. Also, the number of copies that we've recovered of the Gallic Wars, you know how many we have? We have 10. We have 10 copies. Now, you take in contrast the Bible including all the fragments that we have, the partial books and whole copies of the New Testament, they number over 5,000. So, on one side we have Gallic Wars, undisputed. Earliest copies were written over 1,000 years after the fact, and there are only 10 copies of it. On the other side, we have the New Testament, which is denied over and over by critics. It has copies that date somewhere between 50 and 225 years from the facts, and have over 5,000 copies found of it. The closest second place finisher in writings, in historical writings, in relation to the gap between the original writing or event and the earliest copies we have, is Homer's The Iliad, which again is undisputed. The gap between the original and the copies we have of the Iliad is 400 years. And the number of copies we have number 643. So again, I think unless you can call these and many other undisputed historical writings into question, and therefore question all writings of antiquity, and some people do that, then I don't think you can honestly call into question the validity of the New Testament by the standards used to test all other historical writings. I don't see many atheists on YouTube or anywhere else complaining that Caesar's and Homer's and Plato's writings can't be trusted. So I don't think it's intellectually honest to do that. Now, there are some scholars and there are some people out there who believe we can never know history, and then that's honest, and that's an argument that can be discussed. We can't know any history. All of it has been tampered with and played with. That you can do, but that's not what I usually hear. I hear all history is fine except when it comes to you Christians. So that's what I have to say about that. I'd love to hear your comments. I do have to say one other thing. I have warned people before, please do not attack people personally on the comment sections, posting comments. Don't use profanity. That's not going to get us anywhere, okay? And just try to use just try to stick to the facts, okay? And let's not start calling people names. And I just appreciate and would love to hear what you have to say. Thanks.